Hey, team players, and welcome back. In today's episode, we're going to discuss two running backs that may have seen their best days behind them, and they should be on your must-avoid list. But if you haven't already, send us your email. You can find ours on our YouTube homepage to let us know which best ball league you'd be interested in joining in. So, Bob, as I'm looking here, we're going to be talking about Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs. And I'm going to start here with Henry because he's a lot like Travis Kelce in the sense that he always produces, regardless of his circumstances. Dude's going to make it work. Mm-hmm. But I have come to the point where I am now officially off the Henry bus and possibly forever. And here is the reason. The Titans had a horrible offensive line last year. Now, granted, a lot of that had to do with the fact that for a healthy chunk of the season, they had incapable quarterback play. And when you know a team is one-dimensional, you can exploit them to all be all. That being said, none of them have returned. They basically have 5 backups were projected to start, and then they drafted one in the first round who's now going to be their starting left guard. Okay, great. You can't build an offensive line around one guard. And as great as Henry is, he is going to be running behind, if not the worst offensive line in the NFL, the second worst. Hard break. This is like, not only did you fail this class, you have like a 48%, bro. Like, you have no chance of making this a passing grade. I don't care if you ace the final. Mm-hmm. That's where the Tennessee Titans offensive line is. And as good as Henry is, and he is acing the final all day, every day, I don't see a scenario where the Titans have a valid running game. And we did our discussions after April about teams moving forward, what they would be like. At the time, I was on the Titans bus of thinking they might win that division, until I dove into their offensive line numbers. And now I think there's a chance that they're going to come third in that division. In fact, probably come third in that division. And as I say all that, the number one fantasy casualty in my mind, without a doubt, is King Henry. And it pains me to say that, but I need to come out and start with the on-the-field facts about his situation. So that's how I'm looking at it, Bob. And if I'm going to break down the Raiders real quick, Josh Jacobs is an immensely underrated talent running the ball. He is. He's getting up there a little bit in age, but he's one of these categories that's a pure running back, and he's very, very good at it. But again, not as bad as the Titans, but the Raiders have a very bad offensive line. They don't have a defense that's going to preserve a lead at all. It's going to be like trying to keep a candle going in a rainstorm. They ain't preserving leads in Oakland or in LA. I'm going to get this right twice. In Vegas, they are not going to be preserving leads because that defense cannot do it. So we look at a team that has an inept passing game that's not built for its receivers, a bad offensive line. If you take the names out of the equation and you just look at the statistics, look at the overall story, you wouldn't ever want to touch that running back. But Josh Jacobs is the name. So, Bob, I bring these two up because in a lot of leagues, these guys are going next to each other. They're both kind of on the decline. When we did mocks earlier in the year, they were both almost at the turn. Now they're falling closer to the second turn. But I want to bring these two up because Henry for sure, but possibly Jacobs, are league killers. Like, you will lose if you draft them as being your studs.
I'm gonna pull it back on just a couple of things you said there, because I don't disagree with you that they shouldn't. Yeah. Okay. So with Derrick Henry, you know I love Derrick Henry. Mm-hmm. I've had him on my fantasy team a couple of times. I even had him on the fantasy team the year he got hurt. That was a bad year for me because a lot of my other players got hurt, and then I did a trade, and then I got what's his name that ran over everybody from the Raiders. Anyway.
Oh, that receivers in jail, Ruggs.
Yeah, Ruggs. Yeah. So when it comes to Henry, I think that everything that you said is extremely valid. Is that when you look at Tennessee, have they gotten stronger? No, it doesn't look like they have. They did go out and get that offensive lineman, and that looks good. Henry was faced more 8-man fronts than only the top two were Tyler Algier and Derrick Henry, because we knew that Atlanta was running the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And so those two players experienced the most 8-man fronts. And Henry still produced 1,500 yards last year. He also caught 40 passes. And so you look at it and you say, well, that's really interesting because, you were just talking up Jonathan Taylor and you were just talking up Nick Chubb. And, yeah, we were, because their situations are different. Their situation, at least for Chubb, is better. But Henry is declining. And there's a reason that he's not going in the first round, he's going in the second round, because he is declining. And Henry's the exact reason that I would rather have, if I'm drafting at the top half of the first round, Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, Austin Eckler, and come back around and get wide receivers rather than have Derrick Henry, because I'm 100% certain that Derrick Henry is capable of doing what we would want him to do as an RB1. Now, can he do it? Yes. But am I going to be worried about slotting him into my lineup against a really difficult defense? Yes, absolutely. Now, we know that the defenses that the AFC South have to face this year, they're not super elite by any stretch of the imagination.
Oh, the Colts and Jacksonville have good defensive fronts.
That's why I said super elite. We're not looking at like super elite.
But I'm saying you don't need to be super elite to take out this offensive line anymore.
But this is the thing. They weren't very good last year, and he still put up 1,500 yards.
True.
The question with him is maintenance. He's not going to come back as quick from an injury if he gets hurt. Toe injuries are going to start nagging him. He's got a lot of wear on the tires. So a turf toe in week 1 is automatically going to put him at something like 6 weeks to probably recover from that. And I'm not a doctor.
Even if he plays, it's not going to be a full strength.
I'm not a doctor, and I'm just throwing a number out there, but it feels like as players get older and maintenance is an issue, that's one of the things that is a concern for Derrick Henry. And the way that he runs is so extremely violent. And we've said for a couple of years now that it's like, oh, nobody can stop Derrick Henry. But there was a couple of times last year where there were 1, maybe 2 players tapping him, and he fell down. And he wasn't running through people anymore last year. He was running to people and then getting dropped. And that's the thing that I don't like about him, is because his violent nature, which set him apart from every single running back in the league that says, I'm going to run through you. Now it's not the case. Now,
people are going to be meeting him in the backfield this year with that line.
Now they're stopping him where he is. And so for that, and for that alone, essentially, seeing that, I'm out. I'm out on Derrick Henry this year. If the value is there in the 3rd round and I can't pass him up in a 10-team league or in a 12-team league and he's still somehow there, yeah, I would probably take him.
Oh, I don't know about that. I'd rather have Stevenson, Gibbs, or Najee over him.
But there's a lot, especially if you're playing in a home league, there's lots of value that Derrick Henry holds, and you might be able to trade him. If he's your second running back and you're not relying on him on a week-to-week basis to produce running back 1 numbers, but still, that's the problem with Derrick Henry. I don't want a diminishing asset. That's what you're getting out of Derrick Henry.
Well, there's a guy in your league who loves drafting names. This draft will happen in many people, and you might as well just start picking up the tattoo that this guy's going to get. Someone's going to take Cooper Kupp in the 1st round and Derrick Henry in the 2nd round, and pick out your rainbow you want to put on his ass because he's getting tattooed and losing your league. Guarantee it.
So I would say that, with a diminishing asset and an injury risk in Derrick Henry, it's not that I still think he goes over 1,000 yards. I really do. If not being very close to 900, but the touchdowns aren't going to be there. The Tennessee has problems moving the ball. And yes, Ryan Tannehill was out last year, and, they drafted Will Levis, and you ask yourself, well, who's going to produce more, Will Levis or Tyler or Ryan Tannehill? And you're like, well, I don't really know. And so you look at his seasons. You look at Derrick Henry's seasons from 2018 to 2022. 1,059 yards, 1,540, 2027. Then the year he got hurt, 937 and 1,538. So even had he not got hurt in 2021, we probably would have started to see a decline in production in 2022 to a higher degree than we saw it. I mean, you're looking at a guy.
That's fair.
You're looking at a guy whose floor, is 900 yards. He got 13 touchdowns last year, despite that team being hot garbage on an offensive production standpoint there. But I don't think those numbers are going to be sustainable for him. He's going to tote the rock at the goal line. There's no question about that. But the question is Tennessee going to get to the goal line? Is Tennessee going to get to the red zone? And that's kind of the knock that people are putting on Taylor is, are the touchdowns going to be there? Are they going to get to the red zone?
See, to me, the Colts offense is so much more talented.
Yeah, it is. And the is it going to be there is the question for both Taylor and Henry, but Taylor provides you with more upside because he's now, he came off his injury, he's coming back into the league, he's looking, everybody's saying that he's looking healthy and good. We saw Derrick Henry come off an injury, looking healthy and good, throw up 1,500 yards and 13 touchdowns. This year is not the year that I think that he's going to do that. I think that he's going to probably get 1,000 yards, probably going to get 8 touchdowns. That's perfectly fine if you're drafting him in the 3rd round and he's your second running back. That's what I'm saying. He's perfectly fine as an RB2. I don't think he's going to be an RB1. And for those people that are drafting Justin Jefferson and, let's say, Jalen Waddle, and then coming and wanting Derrick Henry, I'm not sold on him as the Derrick Henry of the past as my RB1. RB2, yeah, definitely RB3. If I go like Christian McCaffrey and I go...
It's not an option, though, because someone will draft him because he's a name.
No, you have a chance. If you go Christian McCaffrey, and if you're in the 2 or 3 hole, Christian McCaffrey, there's a good chance you could take him and come around and take Derrick Henry and then also take Ramondre Stevenson. There's a very good chance you can have those 3 running backs on your team. And although Derrick Henry is a diminishing asset, I think he's still going to provide you value if you take him at the right combination for your team. But you've got to consider what your team makeup is. And if I'm going after and I have a team that's Cooper Kupp, who could potentially come back and produce top 5 numbers, we're not going to get into that in this episode, and Derrick Henry, those are both big injury risks. Those are both growing older players. Those are both situations that are not ideal. Then you're going to have more variables that you have to consider. But if you go play it safe with Justin Jefferson, come back at Ramondre Stevenson and take Derrick Henry, I'm not going to say no to that. And I'm also not going to say no to Josh Jacobs, despite you saying all those terrible, bad things about...
That are also factually correct.
Here's the 2 things that I will chase that with, though, is he might sit out week 1. He doesn't have his contract yet. And whereas New York...
Might sit out more than week 1, as Le'Veon Bell has shown us.
Where Saquon Barkley is actively talking to the Giants about contracts, Josh Jacobs is not. He's not going to be in camp. He's not going to be able to build rapport with Garoppolo. He's not going to be able to build rapport with his offensive line. He's not going to be able to know the timings and the things that different plays are going to be. Yeah, he's been in the league long enough that might not cause an issue. But we also said the same thing about Le'Veon Bell. And
Mm-hmm.
Le'Veon Bell
never came back.
and he never came back. And then when he did come back, he sucked.
Mm-hmm.
And so, cautionary tale there, because Le'Veon Bell also had a season that was like, wow, this is the season. This is a great season. And Josh Jacobs is coming off another incredible season like that, where he had 1,600 yards, the leading rusher in the NFL. And you're like, well, why am I not drafting the leading rusher in the NFL in the first round? And, you ask yourself, well, why isn't that? Well, the previous year, 872 yards. Started 14 games, played in 15 games. So that's 2 games difference. Even if you say that he got for 100 and then another 100, you're only sitting there looking at 1,072 yards.
Mm-hmm.
He got 9 touchdowns that year. He scored 12 touchdowns both in 2022 and 2020. He really offers some receiving upside, at least with Carr. He did with 54 receptions and 53 receptions.
Mm-hmm.
And,
and that role could grow under Jimmy G.
Yeah, and his carries, I mean, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games where he went over 100 yards last year. A couple games just below that, and 1 game of 200 yards. And so you look at it and you say, these numbers aren't terrible, but one of the things that was really, really interesting about Josh Jacobs, and just looking at the stats and then seeing it in fantasy numbers, is those touchdowns came in bunches.
Mm-hmm.
So week 4 at Denver, 144 yards, 2 touchdowns. Week 5, 154 yards at a touchdown. Houston, 143 yards and 3 touchdowns. Then in the game he played against Seattle, where he had 229 yards, he had 2 touchdowns. And then the rest of the games were either 1 or 0.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest, and when you look at receiving targets, yeah, he did put up a couple of targets, but mainly those games where he was producing as a runner, he wasn't really catching the ball. And
Mm-hmm.
the games where he didn't really produce as a runner, he was catching the ball a little bit more, but it wasn't enough. And, we talked about Austin Eckler being the number 1 ranked running back last year.
Mm-hmm.
And you look and you say, well, where was Josh Jacobs? Well, he totaled 6th in total touchdowns last year,
Mm-hmm.
which, hey, that's great.
That's always great, yeah.
You're looking at it from a perspective of, has his situation gotten better? And I would say, to a degree, maybe it has, or it hasn't really changed.
It's gotten demonstrably worse.
He's still going to get the ball. He's still going to run the ball if he plays.
The situation is true, but he's going to have more 8-man boxes than he's ever had before, because Jimmy G warrants that.
That's true.
And he's not that good of a runner. He's not Henry who can blow through it.
That's the question that we have. Whereas I look at Derrick Henry and I say, okay, Derrick Henry, if I was picking between the two and I said I want either Josh Jacobs or Derrick Henry, I'm probably going to take Derrick Henry, for the reason is that, yes, all of the reasons I said about Derrick Henry is true. He's not running through people anymore. He's just running to people.
Mm-hmm.
But even when Derrick Henry runs to 2 people, I know that they're going to keep giving him the ball because he's the only weapon. Yes, Traylon Burks and Chig Okonkwo could produce, but we don't know that yet.
I do.
But
I know they won't.
But in Vegas, and this is the same reason I'm scared for Devonta Adams, is that we don't know how Jimmy G is going to set himself up in the system yet. We don't know if this is going to bring out the best in Jimmy G, and we're going to see like resurgence, comeback player of the year type of story, which we probably won't. But if we do, then Adams and Jacobs are going to go bonkers. And do you want to have FOMO with that? And so I'm not taking Josh Jacobs for the sheer fact that you don't want to take a player coming off their best season.
Mm-hmm.
Because the only thing that you are going to be thinking is, I am getting those numbers out of him, but you're not going to be. You're not going to be getting 1,600 yards out of Josh Jacobs. You're not going to get 12 touchdowns out of Josh Jacobs. They're going to have a hard time moving the ball. Same with Derrick Henry. If I'm drafting Jacobs, where I have to draft Jacobs, usually at the top half of the second round,
Mm-hmm.
maybe mid-second round. I don't want that because that's a position where I could have taken Amon-Ra, where I could have taken A.J. Brown, where I could take Chris Olave. Same with Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's going anywhere from the beginning of the second round to the beginning of the third round. If I can get Derrick Henry in the beginning of the third round, if I'm drafting 1, 2, or 3, do it. That's not a problem. But if I have to take Derrick Henry in the middle of the second round, and I'm passing up on T. Higgins, Olave, Devonta Smith, Ramondre Stevenson, who else did I miss there?
Najee.
Najee, Breece Hall, players like that, then I'd be concerned. Because I don't think that the value is going to be there for you. And I think you're going to be left disappointed if you draft Josh Jacobs. And I think you're going to be just whelmed if you draft Derrick Henry, to be honest with you. Like I said, I'm not personally targeting him, but if he falls, he's a player that I can't pass up because he has a history that I know. Even if he's a diminishing asset, he's going from 1,500. Maybe his floor this year is 800 yards. But when we look at a third, fourth, fifth round running back, and I'm looking at potentially having to take Cam Akers in the 5th or 6th, I don't know.
Well, obviously, Bob, we disagree about Henry there. But tomorrow we're going to be talking about two guys whose histories we're not sure we even can apply anymore. So we look forward to talking here in our Best Ball League. Join us. Find us our information right there on our YouTube channel. Click like and subscribe if you haven't already, and we will see you here tomorrow.